Hey everybody, welcome to Before the Hammer Strikes. It's Bjorn Johnson, General Manager at TraVek. Today we have a guest that is going to talk data with us and analytics and some numbers. So don't get bored too soon. I promise it's still going to be exciting. We've got Tina Tamboer with us from the Cromford Report.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So for myself, I've been in the housing industry since 1993, right out of college. And I've been an analyst for about, out of those years, about 20 of those years. So I spent 10 years as an analyst in the 90s with a title company. And then I was in the sales side of things. So I did that for another decade. And then I went back into analytics about 2011. So going on 12, 13 years ago. So I've been doing this solely for that long now.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Our audience is a mixed bag of tricks to a certain extent. We've got homeowners, we've got business owners, and just people that want to know what's going on in the housing market and in the remodeling world. So I think that having you on the show provides an opportunity. I'm a data guy. So before TraVek, I was in the tech industry with some big data companies and different SaaS organizations. I've got a saying that I tell my people, and they probably get sick of hearing me say it, but I always tell them that we need to let the data drive the decisions in our business. That's big for me. Some people let their guts drive it. I probably am a happy median. I have a gut feeling, and then I let the data prove to me whether my gut is wrong or right.
Right.
But you've got a rich history in data and analytics. And tell me about the numbers. Why did you get into data? And now you're a senior analyst for a company that provides data for the whole greater Phoenix Valley area. What got you into that?
Well, I fell into it right out of school, right? So that's kind of how things start. As you know, you get out of school, you take the first job you can get. And so I fell into data entry, database programming in the 90s for a title company. So that's where I got the first taste of how the greater Phoenix market ebbs and flows seasonally, all of the kind of undercurrents that you see. But what really got me into it in the last, say, 10 to 12 years was the crash.
Okay.
So when the crash happened, when the bubble and the crash went on, I happened to be in sales on the ground. And I was not in data. I was, trying to survive that whole unknowingness.
Sure.
And so being in data and knowing that it's there and not having it available to you to see what's going on as you're trying to drive at night without headlights, you want some data to give you an idea of when to turn.
Yeah.
And so the PTSD of that whole time frame got me into data once again in 2011 to make sure that we were never driving without headlights in the real estate market again.
Yeah.
And not knowing that we would go through, the last 3 to 4 and 5 years after COVID, this has been, I guess for me, the reinforcement that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. So, I guess sometimes trauma can shock you back to what you're used to and understand, okay, there's a need here.
Yes. And and a fear. It's more like, it's harder to make decisions when you don't know where things are going and how to compare it to previous times. And so for me, there's always risk, but you like to mitigate that risk with data.
Yeah. And we obviously we have a lot of business owners that tune into the podcast, and a lot of them are looking for opportunities to, well, how do I know which direction to steer my business and what's the right strategic decision? And again, as a business leader, I always fall back to, well, let the data drive your decisions.
Yes.
And if you've got a great idea and you've got this awesome vision, back it up with data. And I think in the real estate world and in the housing market, we see this up and down, and it can be volatile. It can be really secure at times. But I think some people don't really understand that the data can tell the story as to what it's going to look like or what it currently looks like.
Yeah.
What story is the data telling us right now?
So, well, if I were to tell a story about the last 3 years, I would say, let's just pretend that we were having a party in our little, say you're back in school and you're having a party in your little condo, right? And the music's not too loud. Everybody's having a good time. Nobody's getting too raucous, right? And it's nice and sustainable. And then your crazy rich friends come in, and your crazy rich friends with the tequila and the loud music, and they start dancing on the tables and having a good time. That's kind of what happened in the housing market after COVID. We were having a nice sustainable party. Everybody was happy. We were getting about 5 to 9% annual appreciation on our properties,
which is healthy, right?
Yeah. The affordability indexes were all looking pretty good. And then we had the pandemic, and then we had a massive stimulus package launched, and tons of liquidity flooding the market, whether it's going through Wall Street or through cryptocurrencies and all. We were buying. You got it. We were buying cars. We were buying all kinds of stuff. We were all rich. Well, what happened is that when Wall Street got that flood of money, Wall Street got back into real estate. Okay, so the last time Wall Street got into...
Is Wall Street our rich friends? Is that...
Yes,
okay.
Wall Street is our crazy rich friends.
Okay.
With their crazy rich parents funding their partying.
Sure.
Right, which would be the investors. But the last time Wall Street got involved in residential housing was in 2004 and 5, where they invested in mortgages.
Okay.
And mortgages got very, very risky.
Yep.
And we all know what happened after that. This time around, though, because now regulation, the crazy rich friends partied with buying the houses themselves. So you got the open doors, the offer pads that were being fueled by money from Wall Street to buy homes.
Yeah.
And they did not care about affordability. They did not care about whether or not it could be resold at that price even. And they were just reselling to each other. So the open door, the flip investing companies like Open Door and OfferPad would buy the properties, flip them to Wall Street firms. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
taking
absolutely.
Prices beyond what the regular consumer could buy. So while they're partying amongst themselves on the tables, bringing up the music, and everybody's staring at them like, what are you guys doing at this party? A lot of the regular homeowners were shoved to the side and watching this debacle happen. Then the po-po comes. Whenever there's a big party in real estate like that, you're going to have somebody going to call the police. And so next thing you know, the police comes in 2008. It came in the form of the banks shutting down the financing for that activity and causing a massive, drop off in demand, right? And we had the subsequent crash. But then we had the punishment phase. So there's usually po-po and then there's punishment.
Sure.
So
stuff sits on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly.
Lending restrictions get tighter.
This time the police came in the form of the Fed funds rate.
Okay.
And so the feds clamped down on the activity by basically making it so that those properties that were being flipped, short-term flips, were not sellable because the demand had dried up.
Gotcha.
And so by doing that, we had a correction, but what it wasn't regular buyers coming out of the market. They had already been priced out of the market. Sure. Most of the people who took the bite from the 2022 drop in prices, which was about 15%, were short-term holds. That is the most risky type of hold for a property, is a short-term hold. So we had some flip investors that got stuck with properties and ended up having to either rent them out or sell them at a loss. This is where Open Door lost $1 billion in 2022.
Wow.
So that's what happened.
$1 billion with a B.
With a big old B.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, exactly. So that's the story of real estate, but that was just through 2022. But we have more stories to come.
Okay, so there's more to tell.
Yeah.
So that's what put us to where we're at now currently. You've got investors and corporations losing a lot of money.
They already have lost. I would say
back in 2022.
That was 22.
Yeah. And that pushed us to a situation where now the average everyday Joe home buyer or potential home buyer was kind of pushed to the side. And then where does that leave them now? So they lose money. Question. Homeowners get pushed to the side. Now here we are. Fast forward, we have gone from a market what we would have called the dump your junk market. The market of where Wall Street and all of that money was flowing and 57 offers on a house and all of that. That's where we call dump your junk. If you've got a home that, is in terrible condition, it doesn't matter if it's got, a freeway going through the front yard and it's been a cat rescue or something like that. Get rid of it.
It doesn't matter. You would just put it on the market. Somebody would buy it. Boom, like that. That was 2022. And then, of course, the massive reshift in 2022 with the Fed funds rate rising. We were in a mild seller market last year.
Okay.
So last year, that same property would still sell, but you'd have to discount it. You're going to take a hit on price, repairs, and all of that stuff. But it would still sell as is, quote unquote.
Yeah.
This year, in a balanced market, which is where we are today, that property won't even get a showing. So it is no longer dump your junk season.
Right.
This is no longer the season for the not so perfect home. Right.
Okay.
Now your home needs to be improved as much as you can improve it.
Before you sell it.
Doesn't need to be the best condition, but it needs to be at least comparable condition to your competition. So if it's got a funky little smell going on, you need to fix that. If you know that the inspection period is going to come up with a bunch of leaks and things like that, fix all of those things, because you don't want to lose your buyer in the middle of the 10-day inspection period because of the inspection when you have another home down the street that doesn't need it.
Yeah.
So now it's a totally different strategy. You're going to have longer days on market, add an extra couple of weeks before you get an offer that you can accept. And even if you're a perfect home, you're probably going to sit a little bit longer in a balanced market.
Yeah.
So all homes that are perfect, smell perfect, look perfect, upgraded, will still see longer time frames, may not get multiple offers. They might get just one offer in this type of market. That one offer will not be for more than asking price. It will most likely be lower than their asking price.
I'm sure.
Yes. But it will sell. So perfect homes sell in any market. It's just managing your expectations as a seller. What we've moved into is the market for the not so perfect buyer. Okay, so the buyer that's not so perfect now, which the sellers are more than willing to bake cookies for and invite them into their home to come see, which they were kicked to the curb like literally a couple of years ago.
Right.
Those people would be, I've got a contingent sale. Like I have to sell my home first. The sellers are like, fine, we'll take it. Or they are having down payment assistance or low down payment, no down payment, or they're going to need a lot of help to maybe buy down their rates. So there's all kinds of tools, or even what comes out are all the tools that we haven't needed to use since literally the 90s, like assumptions. Have you ever heard of an assumption?
Yeah.
Nobody cared about assumptions for a bajillion years because those rates were higher anyway, and we had very low rates. But now you've got people with sub 3%, sub 5% loans that maybe are only a few years old, and another buyer can come in, especially if it's FHA or VA, can come in and assume that lower rate. So now you've got an entire industry that is not educated on assumptions. And we got the veterans of the 90s are coming in to kind of save the day and help people get through how to do an assumption loan.
So it's interesting as I hear you talk through the stories of what you guys are seeing from an analytics standpoint. We feel it. We see it in our industry. So TraVek, with being in a balanced market and needing that perfect, quote unquote, perfect home to sell, we're starting to see more and more homeowners come to us and say, my hall bathroom isn't quite what it should be. Yeah. Can you guys come in quickly and can you make it pretty? Yeah. And to the point to where we've even launched a 5-day hall bath program where we can knock out a hall bath in 5 days for $25K or less for that exact reason. Yeah. There's a homeowner that is either trying to sell their home, or we get those that they've just been living with it and they want to do something with their hall bath. But from a seller's market, needing to have the house in a condition that's competitively sellable. Exactly. We see that on the roofing side. We are getting calls like crazy to come take a look at the roof, do an inspection, get the leaks fixed, or shore that up pre-list. Yeah. So we're finding that in this interesting market, we're starting to have different strategic partners with real estate agents and homeowners to make sure their house is that pretty house on the block. Yes. That can sell. So I guess I didn't know the data beforehand, but what we were feeling and experiencing, like we talked about earlier in our gut, now I've got the full story on why that's happening. Exactly. So it's a combination mainly of the listings have popped up this year. So last year we had record low new listings coming on the market. So even though we had low demand from the high mortgage rates, the supply was so low that it was still a mild seller's market. Okay. This year, a lot of sellers have gotten off the fence, but it's still the second lowest year for new listings, just higher than last year. Just a little higher than last year. Right. And we still have low demand, about 10% lower for this time of year than last year. So it's causing the not so perfect homes to accumulate on the market. Yeah. And the perfect homes still sell, but they don't sell as fast or at the price that some of those sellers would have liked. But still,
they're selling. So
Right.
we still have a good amount of inventory coming in, but it's been flat so far for a couple of months, which is good for sellers. So we're seeing a stabilization in the supply line.
Okay.
And the most recent developments with mortgage rates, with the announcement from the Fed that they were not going to raise the rate, but then the subsequent unemployment report came out and kind of shot the bond market came down. And with that came a nice sharp drop in mortgage rates, which means that everything is now on sale. Even if the prices don't move on houses,
the payments still went down.
The payments, so everything is technically on sale now. We went from about 7.5% in April down to, we hit for about a day, we kissed 6.3%.
Okay.
For conventional, that's huge. But then to go down to FHA, which is everything under 500,000,
right?
FHA hit sub 6% at 5.75%,
which is low for right now.
Well, considering that I bought a home in 2022 at a 5.8% mortgage rate, which I thought was outrageous,
right?
And that I was certainly going to refinance in a year when the rates came down.
Isn't that crazy? What perspective we have, and then all of a sudden,
now all of a sudden I'm like,
the market tells us no.
Yeah. So I think that that literally is a couple $100 off of somebody's potential mortgage payment. So you're seeing a round of refinances. A lot of people just called their mortgage company that bought a couple of months ago just to refinance with that nice steep drop. That doesn't mean that the buyer activity is going to shoot back up, because they've been sleeping. They're like, what? Like the alarm just went off. They're still a little groggy. They have to get going on the rates if they have now been kicked back into the marketplace. So I think that as long as these rates stay, at about 6.5, between 6 and 6.5 stable, we'll see a nice measurable improvement in demand.
But it should be something steady, not something like crazy like we saw back in 2006, 2007.
No, yeah.
We're going to see a stable increase potentially.
None of the numbers today tell us that we're on the cusp of a crash.
Okay.
There has been a real estate influencer that has been getting quoted quite a bit in the media that has been quoting that Greater Phoenix is crashing, currently crashing, on his top 10 list of crashing cities.
Sure.
He has one major flaw in his analysis. He's using list prices.
Okay.
And so list prices have dropped 9.5%, but the average list price is drastically affected by luxury. And every year, especially in Greater Phoenix, but I assume also in southern states where it gets hot in the summer, a lot of the luxury listings cancel right around May, June, July, take them off the market for the summer before they relist in, say, September, October. So what it does is when the wealthy take their ball and go home, it drags your overall average down.
Sure.
And so he's looking at a drop in list prices and a spike in price reductions. And
just
says,
forecasting that there's a crash on the way.
That there's a crash on the way. But the reality is, if you take the luxury market out, take out everything over $1 million, say, the list price per square foot is actually flat and almost identical to where it was a year ago.
So we're pretty stable.
Yeah, it's not really headline material.
Yeah.
See? And so because of that, we're not really waving any flags. He's the only one raising a flag.
Yeah. Well, I want to, can I touch on that for a second? Because
of course.
Obviously, you see influencers or you see different people from around the country that could raise a flag, create panic, create fear. You guys are local.
Yeah.
Like you're only here and you've made a business out of knowing the greater Phoenix area data and metrics intimately, which I think gives you an advantage over somebody who's maybe East Coast or in the southern states or Pacific Northwest that's just seeing something on the table and making a forecast.
Exactly.
You guys have really in-depth information because you've been here. This is home. You're not anywhere else. Is there some value there with I guess trust in the numbers and the forecast that you put out?
Because we have a data license with the Arizona Regional MLS that allows us to download all of their fields, we actually have data that somebody in Florida is scraping, their data off of websites like Realtor.com, they're not going to have.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I can tell you that when a market shifts out of a seller's market into a balanced market, the first price to move is not a sales price. It is the seller's expectation of price, which is the list price coming down. So you are going to see a number of price reductions as the sellers bring their price out of the stratosphere to where the air is and the buyers are actually breathing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that your sale price is going to drop. That just means their expectation for what they're going to get is going to drop. The second price is not a sales price either. The second price is the cost to the seller to the buyer in terms of concessions.
Interesting.
So the next thing that happens is the buyer comes in to the seller. They said, I'm going to give you close to what you're asking for and your last list price. But now I need help to buy down my rate, so I'm going to ask you for 2 or 3% to pay for my closing costs.
Sure.
You're probably going to get hit with, if you've got solar, you might be paying off the solar. If you've got, a rate buy down, 2-1 buy downs, which is where say the rate's 6.5 today. A 2-1 buy down would be where the seller basically supplements your payment, so you're paying the equivalent of 4.5 for 1 year, and then a 5.5 for the second year. And then finally the 6.5. And that gives you 2 years to see where the rates are going to go before you can permanently set your rate.
Plan on where you want to be.
So those types of contributions from the sellers, when they might be walking away with slightly less money, but the sale price that is recorded is still high. Right. So you will still see the sale prices going flat. Those costs to the seller underneath will grow. Then if the concessions and the price reductions don't work, and we still start slipping into, say, a buyer's market, which we're not right now, but if we were, that's when you start to see the negotiations off of that sale price will start hitting, and you will start to see the prices decline. But it takes months and months to see the effects of that. About 3 to 6 months after a market shifts out of one, say, a seller market to balance market to buyer market, takes 3 to 6 months to start seeing it in a sales price line.
Okay. So that's not the first number that people look at, or they should be looking at anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the sales price, and if anything should happen in between, it's done. Right. So here we are in a balanced market, and these mortgage rates, as they come down, if they stabilize or continue down, you will most likely see in the next, we're in August.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the year, you might actually start to see some kind of improvement.
Okay.
But first thing you'll see is the demand will pick up. But if supply goes with it, then you won't see any.
Then you won't see that anymore.
You won't see any difference in price. Yeah. But we, as an industry, we will be a lot busier.
Sure. So I want to touch on two things. There's been a lot of really good information in this conversation, by the way. So thank you. As a homeowner, is the timing right for somebody to stay in their home? Should they be listing their home? Should they be trying to buy a home? Should they be contacting TraVek to remodel their home? What? And this isn't a loaded question, by the way, but what's the right thing to do right now for somebody that's in a home that may not want to be there for the next 30 years, but what do they do?
There's a lot to consider in that question.
Okay.
It seems like it should be easy, but it depends on what price point you're in, for one. Luxury is a different animal. Luxury does not like the stock market going crazy. As we all know, the stock market went a little crazy, so that tends to pause the luxury market. They'll hold on for a bit to see which way it goes. They don't like uncertainty. Same thing with the election coming up. That's going to affect luxury more than it affects anybody else.
Yep.
And so with the luxury, we have kind of an uncertain fourth quarter. You can try listing your home, make sure it's competitively priced and in good condition. If it doesn't work, you might consider taking it off for the fourth quarter and relisting in the spring, which is typically where most of our luxury buyers come in.
Okay.
But if you are part of the 80% that do track mortgage rates and things, we might see a nice little boost in the summertime with a drop in rates. That, as a seller, might be good news for you. Also, as a buyer, though, if you're a seller that's then going to be a buyer, the best time to be a buyer is in the latter half of the year.
Okay.
Because typically what we see is the buyer demand tends to glide down from about May, June, all the way to December. We have a little rally in supply right around September, so we get a boost of supply, but we don't get a huge boost in demand.
Right.
And so that means that as a buyer, you're well placed to take your time, ask for what you want, look at all of the houses, do all of the things, and you're not pressured unless it's a perfect house.
Sure.
Because if it's a perfect house, those might go.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there's not as much pressure to respond like, oh my gosh, I just saw the pantry, that's enough, let's go right.
Right.
So as far as the buying experience goes, this is probably going to be a very nice time.
It's a good time to buy.
It's a good time to buy, especially again if you're the not so perfect buyer.
Okay, makes sense. One last thing that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned some of the 90s veterans coming out of the woodworks that have been through the assumption piece before. Are we also going to see some of the owner carries and some of the rent to own? I mean, it spiked. The whole rent to own thing spiked for a little while. Owner carries have been gone for a little bit.
Yeah.
With some of these assumptions or assuming the loan or assuming the rate, are we going to see some more of that come into play, or what do you see there?
Owner carry is a little harder because most owners, unless they are investors that don't need that money for something right away, the owners typically need their equity payment to buy their next place.
Yeah.
So I think not necessarily going to see a lot of seller carries. You might see some of it, but I don't expect to see any big influx of it right now.
Okay.
Now, had we gone longer into this, maybe, as people get a little more desperate.
Right.
But I'd say probably not going to see a spike in that. We might see a little bit of gap funding, which would be good. So you assume, say somebody bought their home and it was $200,000 5 years ago, and it was FHA and it was 2.5% or whatever, and now it's worth $400,000. Well, you still have to find that gap for $200,000. If the seller can't finance you, then you either have to come in with cash or you're gonna have to find a lender who's okay taking on a second. And you have to do all of that math with your lender.
Sure. And that's some of the stickiness on the assumption side that this current generation maybe isn't familiar with how to bridge some of that.
But you get an assumption that maybe the loan's only a couple of years old. You're not looking at, especially if they were purchased in early 2022, you're probably not looking at too much equity for payment.
Yeah.
So you can probably figure one of those out. It's the ones that are older that you might have to figure out the gap. But overall, like I said, these conversations would never even have happened a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Because we weren't in a balanced market. Some of our markets out in the outskirts of town are even in buyer's markets now. So you might get builders even, that might even help you out. So what I did was a while ago, I took a poll on one of my Zooms. And as things were getting creative out there, we started comparing this market to the 80s. If you remember, you might have seen some headlines that said, oh, the affordability is like the 80s. The 80s were actually worse. Okay.
Interesting.
But we interviewed a few people that said, how did you buy your first home in the 80s? And the stories that came out were really, I felt, fascinating and kind of exciting. They had 3-2-1 buy downs at the time. A lot of them assumed VA loans at what they thought was a great 6% rate. Because in the 80s, it was an 18% rate.
Right.
They bought with their brothers or sisters. One of my friends bought with two of his friends. 3 guys bought one home, and then ended up one person got married and bought the other 2 out, and they all won. And had parents help them with down payments. One of them had their Scottsdale condo wouldn't sell, and so the builder bought their Scottsdale condo for them so they could buy a brand new home.
That's unreal.
So there are all kinds of tools in the real estate industry that are not reported on in the overall numbers. So while somebody thinks it's really super unaffordable, some of these tools that have just been collecting spider webs and dust are just, pulled off the shelf.
And they're still out there, right? They haven't gone away. They just haven't been used.
They haven't been used, and they'd have to retrain a whole nother, industry of people to understand what they are, even, because we've been so spoiled. Frankly, for over 20 years, we've been so spoiled with rates being decent and the process being better just to get your own loan that we haven't had to do a whole lot of the fancy footwork.
Well, and this is kind of a cool topic because you hear it all the time, right? Housing is unaffordable. I can't buy a home. There's no way in this market or in this economy. Like, there's just no way for somebody to be able to afford to buy a home. But it's cool to hear stories that you rewind to a time in the 80s where it was even less realistic to buy a home. And there's creative tools out there. If we just look back, history can repeat itself.
Yeah.
And like you said, we dust the cobwebs off and we start applying some of these tools. Now all of a sudden, it opens up the market for people that think that possibly they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, and also and one other piece I forgot was the whole sweat equity, the whole idea of doing it yourself. You know what I mean?
Where'd that go?
I know. What? Well, we need a good recession for people to start doing stuff.
I think you're right. I think you're probably right.
And if you think about it, we have not had a recession for 15 years.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the fear around recessions that's the biggest topic right now when it comes to the economy is, are we going to have a recession or not have a recession? And in recessions, actually housing recovers, believe it or not. In recessions, if you go all the way back to the 70s, with exception of 2008, almost every time home prices have either gradually risen or gone flat during recessionary periods. But mortgage rates have always come down.
Right.
So that means, again, if we hit a recession, you might actually see the affordability indexes
it's not the end of the world for this market. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the beginning of recovery for homes, typically.
And there's so many different opinions on recession and the economy, and the data will tell the story.
Right.
But, we even see that in our industry, one vertical for us is a have to have. Roofing, people have to have a roof over their head. And if something's wrong with your roof, you got to get TraVek out there to look at it, fix it, and make sure that you don't have water coming in the house or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
The other vertical of our business is more a want to have. It's redoing your kitchen so that you're not embarrassed when family comes over for the holidays. It's, creating more space, or people's lives have changed. Now the kids are gone and they want their beautiful home that they've always wanted. It's less recession proof because it's a want to have. And then one of them is a have to have. But what we see is that even in economical times that people are struggling or different businesses are suffering, we just talked about this in our team meeting. We're in a position where we are growing. We're bringing on more customers. We're bringing on more employees, because I think if you do the things that you need to do the right way, recessions will come and go. And sure, it's more difficult at times, or it's easier at other times. But you mentioned sweat equity, like those businesses, for you business owners that are listening, that are willing to roll up your sleeves, let the data drive your decision, and then act appropriately. Every business can almost be recession proof. Yeah. Now there are some that things are nice and they're fat and happy, and things just come in, and then you get complacent and things get a little bit rocky, and now all of a sudden you're not used to working as hard as you did, or you don't have the right processes in place. And I think that's where businesses start to really feel any sort of turn down or any type of turmoil out there.
Downturn or downtime is typically a time for anxiety. If you're a business owner, you're like, why don't I have more to do right now? But when I talk about sweat equity, there's always, there's the stuff you can learn how to do on YouTube, but there are certain things, like for me, myself, I'm not going to go and learn how to do plumbing.
Right.
Okay. And I'm not going to certainly learn how to do my own roof on YouTube, but I'm probably going to paint my own wall instead of hiring a painter, stuff like that. But, if it's 18 feet, I might save that for the professional.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? But if I can reach it, I'm probably going to try to do some of the work myself. And then you might have a little opportunity there for the professionals to come in and fix whatever I messed up.
Sure. That happens too.
That too.
Yep.
You can have your tagline can be, I fix bad do-it-yourself jobs. But, I think that when it comes to the fixer in the real estate world, the fixer-up home is a lot more intimidating for those buyers now. So it is still better off that you try to fix your home up a little bit, get it updated a little bit before, because now, as opposed to before, where people would say, "Oh, I'll get maybe a home equity line of credit to pay for my remodel."
Later.
But the rates are too high now, so and there's this feeling that it's too expensive. For the buyers. And so for the sellers to be able to get that done up front is really going to be their best option, and the best probability that your home's going to actually get viewed and sold.
It makes sense. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you again for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge. We enjoy doing this with people like you that are smarter than me and smarter than a lot of those that could potentially talk on this subject. So really appreciate you being available. You your business focuses mainly on giving solid information to the real estate agent and the professionals on that side of
Yes.
things, so that they can then relay that to the
Yes.
homeowner and to the general public.
Yeah.
Where do they find you? If I'm a real estate agent, how do I find you? How do I get access to this data?
Well, we're really easy to find. We're just cromfordreport.com. And if you want to sign up as a real estate professional, because we are proprietary
Okay.
for real estate agents, members of the Arizona Regional MLS. That is where our data license comes from. And so therefore their members benefit from our research. So for those members, it's just email us at accounts with an S at cromfordreport.com, and we send them a link after we verify that they're a member. And for the rest of the industry, like TraVek, like title companies and lenders, we have something called Cromford Public that we can sell you. That's an annual subscription. It's $240 a year, and you get from public record. We track fix and flips there. We track the builder permitting, and we can up, of course, sales and prices and all of that. It's public record instead of MLS. So we have a little deeper knowledge through MLS data of
Sure.
what's underneath those lines, but those are still, especially the flip activity maps, you can get a pretty good idea of what areas are still providing the return for flip investors, even and more so than other areas perhaps, and price points and so on. So that's definitely proven to be a very positive thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Yeah. You guys heard it. There's a couple of resources that you can go to. If you're a real estate agent, you have got to check this out and get the data that you need. If you're just a general homeowner and you're in our community and you want to know what's going on with different trends, there's an opportunity for you to know that too. Usually we talk business, we talk remodel, we talk trades. Today we talk data, everything that you need to know from a data perspective before the hammer strikes. So thank you again for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Thank you everybody for listening, and we cannot wait to bring another guest on next week and give you some more information and some education. Thanks, and have a great weekend.